Hey everyone, Chris from Nerdy Facts here to present you our latest features, Nerdy Opinions, pretty much the exact opposite of what our brand represents. I guess you enjoyed the first one enough to warrant a follow-up, our Empire Strikes Back, if you will, which is fitting because I'm trying to segue into a Star Wars discussion.
But not before I introduce you to my co-host, Mike.
Who couldn't be here today, because, he never agreed to be my co-host.
We all pray for his swift recovery.
As I mentioned a moment ago, today we'll be discussing Star Wars, or more specifically, the Star Wars prequels. Even more specifically, whether or not the Star Wars prequels have a place in the current Star Wars canon. And even more specifically than that, no, they do not. I should elaborate. I'm not suggesting that the prequels never happened. They happened, no matter how many times I tell myself otherwise. What I'm suggesting is that we make it so that the prequels only kind of happened. You see, there was this big thing a few years back where Disney purchased Star Wars from George Lucas. Maybe you heard about it. Anyway, in addition to promising new Star Wars movie every year until the agonizing heat death of the universe, Disney also informed us that the expanded universe material would no longer be canon. This means that the voices of millions of books, video games, and Ewok movies suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. But these things didn't go away entirely, they were simply downgraded to legend status. You might be asking yourself, what is a Star Wars legend anyway? Well, it's exactly what a regular legend is. It's something that could have happened and probably borrowed elements from reality, but was likely embellished. So stories like Knights of the Old Republic became the Star Wars equivalent of when King Arthur pulled the sword from the stone, or that time Tom Cruise fought Tim Curry in demon makeup. This allows Disney to pick and choose elements that they like from the expanded universe without contradicting canon. It's why they're able to use characters like Thrawn in Star Wars Rebels. They're not claiming that Thrawn did everything he did in the books, but he might have done some of it. Which brings us back to the prequels. Now, so far Disney has been pretty adamant that all the theatrical films are canon, as well as the Clone Wars, Rebels, and any book published under their supervision. But you'll notice that they've been very iffy about prequel material. The Force Awakens went out of its way to distinguish itself from them, refusing to even include similar-looking alien designs. The only significant pulls from Rogue One were the inclusion of Bail Organa, who's a character that was technically pulled from A New Hope, and Mustafar, which is one of the only planets that doesn't receive a title card in the movie. Think about that. Rogue One is a prequel itself, and even it tries to ignore the prequels. So if all the new films can ignore them, why can't we? I'm saying it here and now. Disney should declare the prequels non-canon and demote them to legend status. The events from the films may have actually happened in the canon, but not as they're depicted. Obviously, Anakin was still a Jedi who betrayed Obi-Wan and became Darth Vader, but the details of that story could be entirely different. Maybe he was never Obi-Wan's Padawan. He could have just been a fellow Jedi. Maybe Jar Jar never existed. He was just a buffoon from some myth that was created to explain how Palpatine came to such power. Politics are complicated, and it's easier to just blame it all on an imaginary scapegoat. Now, some of you might be asking, what does this do to the Clone Wars? Is that also a legend? Absolutely not. That show is fantastic, and that's the beauty of legends. Anything that the Clone Wars relies on can be pulled from the prequels without taking everything else. It also fixes a problem with the show, which is that Ahsoka is never even hinted at in the prequels, despite being a major influence on all of the characters. Oh wait, Jar Jar's in some of those too. And the Clone Wars movie is pretty bad. Then there's that one weird story arc with the Celestial ones who embody the light and dark side of the Force. You know what? Clean sweep. You can enjoy those Clone Wars on your own time, but they gotta go too. We start at Rebels now. So what's the next step? Now that we've disassembled the entire franchise, it's time to rebuild. Eventually, after Episode 9 has passed and we've had origin movies for Jabba the Hutt, Lobot, and Salacious Crumb, Disney is going to want to do more episodes. That's the time to put that Legends material to good use. We remake the prequels, mercifully without George Lucas, and now with more practical effects to give the franchise more of a visual unity. We borrow the story elements that work and create a new story that's actually good, or at least not utterly terrible. What's more is that we now have a whole host of good prequel characters and Clone Wars stories to make other solo movies of. If we do lose the show, then let's take the best story arcs and get high-budget movies for those. I'd kill to get a Clone Cadets movie, and think of what we could do with Darth Maul. Mainly that we don't kill him in the first movie and force future material to bring him back in an enormously convoluted way. And for those of you who think the prequels are good and don't need to be removed from canon, well, this is Nerdy Opinions. All of this is just what I think, and you're free to make your own video about what you think. Also, your opinion is wrong. That's all the time we have today. Join us next time when we talk about how the original Star Wars movies should be removed from canon instead. Then we remake the originals entirely in CGI to fit with the visual style of the prequels. Also, the only new Star Wars movie that we keep is the Han Solo movie. I'll get into more of it then, it's going to be terrible.